Okay, let's try and understand something called universal computation. Now, this concept is not so trivial to understand, but we're going to try our best right now. So, first, we're going to start off with a definition of what a universal computer actually is. So, here's a universal computer, and a universal computer can perform any computational procedure, also known as an algorithm. Okay, now what is a computational procedure? And the best way to get a feel for what a computational procedure is to first know that everything your computer does is a computational procedure. This video, every time you click or send a text or any of these things, this is all under the umbrella of a computational procedure. Okay, which means that this universal computer can replicate any of these procedures. Now, all of these procedures, including the audio and this video and every text you send and every computational procedure ultimately boils down to being zeros and ones. Okay, that's also important. So everything that, again, this audio is just an interpretation of zeros and ones. All the data for what it is that you're hearing right now turns into zeros and ones, and then there's, the computer takes the zeros and ones and says exactly that this sequence of zeros and ones means to, have this exact sound made, and that gets put all together into my voice and this video that you see before you in this drawing and so forth. But okay, so we need to have that in our minds, that every computational procedure can ultimately be put into just a sequence of zeros and ones. Now, with this in our minds, let's get a better idea of what a universal computer is. Now, we said from the beginning that a universal computer can perform any computational procedure. Now, what this means is that if I build a universal computer, here's my universal computer, I can program this computer to essentially do whatever it is that I want. Okay, it can perform any algorithm. So what's an example of what it could do? I could program it, since a computational procedure. So what's an example of computational procedures? Squaring a number. Okay, listing primes. Okay, or I don't know, anything, adding two numbers. I mean, these are all math examples, but it could be reversing the digits of a string. The input, reverse it. That's a computational procedure. But if I wanted to, right, I could input into this universal computer any number, and I could tell it, using zeros or ones or whatever the language is. I could, put in a bunch of zeros and ones. I could say that this is the program, this piece of the string is the program, square a number, and then I can put in the number, in binary, let's say, I don't know, whatever, let's say that it's that many digits. This is the number 2 in binary, okay? But that doesn't matter. This is the number, and this is me telling it which program. So this is the squaring a number program. I'm telling it which program to run with this piece, and then I'm saying what to input into that program with this piece, and it will output the correct answer. It will output the number 4 in binary. This is your output. And I could program this computer again to do any computational procedure. Now, hopefully we have an idea of what a universal computer is, and we're going to go through, if we look here, right, at some cellular automata, if we look here, and these are not like the ones that we were just going over, but they're a little bit more complicated in that they allow for, in this case, 8 possible colors for each cell. This is from Stephen Wolfram's book, A New Kind of Science, and he illustrates the idea of how these types of automaton can do computation. So basically here you have this input. Here's the input, just that first row. And if you input and you say, okay, black, whatever, gray. Okay, it's saying 2 because it's saying to stop here. This is sort of like a stop piece. So you're inputting the number 2, and then you let the cellular automaton, run. And what it does is it outputs this value of 4. If you count the number of black squares, you have 4 black squares. And this cellular automaton will compute the square of any number. So you put in 3, again, this is the input, and it'll give you 9 as an output. And this cellular automaton can do this computational procedure of squaring a number. Now, this cellular automaton can square a number. This cellular automaton can produce primes. So it's similar that, there's some input along here maybe, or some input, and it basically illustrates that this is going to give you, some number of primes depending upon this input here or up there or somewhere it's being coded for primes. If you look here, it even has it much larger. The white spaces are where primes are. So if you look and you start counting here, 1, and you see that it's black, is not a prime number. 2 is white, and 2 is the first prime. 3 is white, it's the second prime. 4 is not a prime, so then therefore it's not selected. 5 is the next prime, 7 is the next one, and so forth. And you see that here, everywhere where there's a white cell in that bottom row is a prime. So it's essentially giving you these primes as you go out, again, off of the input. And if you change the input, it would do this for longer, and you would get something that looks like the larger picture over here. And you see that these are 2 computational procedures that are being done by 2 different cellular automaton. But what was proved is that we could actually use a basic cellular automaton to be a universal computer. So if we go to here, this rule number 110, was proved by Matthew Cook to show that you can program the initial input. You can put in this initial input to do any computational procedure. So if I read the output correctly, so now I have to read the output correctly, but let's see. Okay, so if I put in an input string, so let's lower the number of steps, let's say it's 10, and then let's lower this to 12, and then let's just pick a simple string, click generate. Okay, so here you see that input, that first layer, is going to be, the 2 black, the 1 1, there's a 0 there, but okay, let's just make it okay, but then it spreads it. But okay, there's 3 black, 0 1 0 1 0 in that first row, and that's sort of the input string. That's your input. And if I put that input correctly and I read the output equally correctly, I can do any computational procedure, including the computational procedures that I just showed you. So I put this first row, this string in the first row, in the exact right way, and then I read this the correct way. I say, okay, when I see, in this very complicated way, when I see that sort of interaction here between these 2 things, they're called gliders, how we proved it. But, I see this interaction between this one glider, this other glider, and then I say, okay, well, that's a 0. or something along those lines. And then, I keep going and I look down this page and I say, okay, well, here's here's this configuration, whatever, and there's a certain distance apart or whatever it be, and then I say that's a 1. And with that, okay, with me interpreting this output correctly, and I say 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, here, I can literally get anything to be produced, including the sequence of digits, the sequence of bits, the sequence of zeros and ones that make up this video. So if I were careful, I could sit here and I could code in this here, so that way when I read out this whole thing here, it would give me this video, or again, any computational procedure, okay? Because this thing is universal. This is a universal computer. So again, like, I could, okay, instead of me having this universal computer, it's rule 110. And if I, again, same idea, I could input that string in such a way that, it would get I could get any of these things, adding two numbers, whatever, any computational procedure, depending upon how I program the input, that first row. And I have enough space. I would have to make that row large. But I could do any universal computer. Now what's interesting about this